All right. Are we broadcasting now, I suppose?
Yeah.
Yes. Great.
Yes.
Welcome, everybody, to this really exciting virtual session as part of the Skoll World Forum. So as you can see here, my name is Santosh Ramdas. I am a member of the Skoll Foundation team, and I'm really excited to invite you all to join this Skoll World Forum virtual week. And this is day one of the first events to be hosted. And this is an incredible event being hosted by IMPAQTO and folks here. And thank you all for bringing this together and hosting this. I'll just say a couple of things before we hand it off to Anika and Michelle. The Skoll World Forum, as you all know, takes place every spring in Oxford. It brings together more than 1,200 leaders from across the world of social entrepreneurship, philanthropy, and social change. This year, we were forced to cancel it because of the COVID-19 crisis. And like many of you, I'm sorry, I just got a message saying somebody I cannot hear, but I'm assuming the rest of the panelists can hear me. I'm assuming the line's going through. Okay. Like many of you in our team, we're all working remotely and 100% for the last few weeks. So, and we're finding new ways to connect and bring communities together. And this is an incredible opportunity to do so. And it turns out the theme for this year's forum was going to be collective strength. And it's really a reflection of our global network and the fact that we've gone ahead with the virtual forum and brought this together and, for instance, put this panel together is a real solidarity moment for us in terms of how this community is brought together. And there are 80 different organizations hosting events, and it's all self-organized and and it really is an indication of our collective strength. And I cannot, like, it makes us incredibly proud and thoughtful about the moment we are in. And lastly, I'll just make a quick plug. On Thursday, other than the events that are hosted by various organizations, we do have a plenary to announce this year's Skoll awardees. It's at April 2nd, Thursday at 11 a.m. Eastern. I'll leave it in the chat, and I would love that everybody who's listening and all the panelists, of course, are able to join us. I would like to now hand it off. I'll just say one last thing, which is to say, this is a moment more than ever where we're all forced to act locally but think globally. And the role that ecosystem builders and intermediaries play in this is more critical than ever because we can't get on planes. We rely on you. And as leaders in your space, I think this is an incredibly timely conversation. And I'm really excited that Anika and Michelle are going to run this. So Anika, I'm going to hand it off to you. And thank you very much for doing this.
Thank you, Santosh. I really appreciate it. And with that, welcome everybody to our session about global perspectives from ecosystem builders in response to COVID-19. My name is Anika Horn. I'm the founder of Social Venturers. Social Venturers is a global community, small but hopefully mighty one day, of ecosystem builders for social change. So all of the panelists that you see here are people who I've had the incredible honor to interview over the last year, as well as 50 other social impact professionals around the world, to really learn about their approach to nurturing and building entrepreneurial ecosystems around purpose-driven founders. And at Social Ventures, I'm on a mission to equip ecosystem builders for social change with the insights, the resources, and the peer community to lead fulfilling lives while also building purpose-driven careers. And having conversations with these incredible panelists who you're about to meet has really allowed me to start creating a lot of insight around the topic of ecosystem building and making sure that we as ecosystem builders in the process continually strive for excellence and not burn out in the process of supporting founders. Before we dive in, I would like to acknowledge a few things. First off, thank you all thank you to everybody who's here. We seem to have over 120 participants, as well as some incredible speakers who you will meet here in a minute. I would like to acknowledge how hard this work is. I appreciate all of you being out there in the world, either starting social enterprises or committing your careers to supporting social entrepreneurs and helping them through this difficult time, helping them stay alive, reboot, adapt, whatever that looks like in your community. Thank you. I would also like to acknowledge everybody who can't join us today, who will hopefully be able to listen to this recording or enjoy some of the follow-up resources that we will put together as a team following this conversation. Thank you for all of the work that you're doing all around the world. We really appreciate it. Lastly, something to keep in mind for everybody as we have this conversation, The beauty of this panel is that we hail from not only different countries, but different continents. It's right now for all of our panelists somewhere between 9 a.m. and 8 p.m. Please keep in mind as we have discussions, as we have questions, that we're all on different curves of this current pandemic. We all live in different countries with different governments. We all have very personal, emotional experiences. So just as you engage in this conversation, please be very mindful of our very different situations right now. And lastly, as we would do with a regular in-person panel, I would love if you could hold off your questions until the end. We have scheduled some time for Q&A. It'll be too much if I try to have questions in between the panels. So let's hear from the panel first, and then we can really dive into the topic, into the questions that you may have. Michelle, a wonderful co-host, reached out to me not too long ago and said, Anika, I'm really worried. This pandemic affects everybody on an individual level, but I'm also really concerned about the entrepreneurs who we're trying to help, because obviously they're in a very vulnerable situation in trying to keep their companies alive. And even more so, how do we as ecosystem builders respond? How do we keep our organizations running? And how do we continue to support entrepreneurs when our resources are getting scarcer and scarcer by the day? Ecosystem building is an incredibly hard work on a good day when there's no pandemic around the world. But I think especially with the current situation that we find ourselves in, it is even harder to bring together the resources and to respond to a situation that we don't really know what's going to happen next. So there's a lot of uncertainty. And my hope is that by talking to these panelists, we will have an opportunity to learn from how they're responding, what they're seeing in their communities, and turn this challenge into an opportunity for us as ecosystem builders to drive our communities forward and really consider how we can solve such a systemic problem with systemic answers. Before we dive into the panel, and I can't wait to introduce you to these people, I want to make sure we're all on the same page in terms of terminology. Ecosystem building is still a pretty nascent field. I know that not everybody's even aware of the fact that they are an ecosystem builder. So for the sake of this conversation, I am leaning on the definition by the Kauffman Foundation here in the US, which has been heavily invested in moving this movement of entrepreneurial ecosystem building forward for the last 5 years. And the working definition we use at Kauffman is that the essence of an entrepreneurial ecosystem is its people. So I like to think everybody on this call is an ecosystem builder, but also the culture of trust and collaboration that allows them to work together effectively. And what that means is you may have experiences in your own life where you try to support entrepreneurs, but not all of the actors in your ecosystem are on the same page. They might have different goals in mind of what they're trying to achieve. There might be some personal history. There might be a lack of communication between the different parties of what it is that social entrepreneurs in your community need right now. And our job as ecosystem builders is to not only keep our own organizations alive and thriving to support entrepreneurs, but to also go above and beyond and think about the entire system. And what does the entire system need? What do social entrepreneurs need? Am I the right person to provide that? Or would I be better off partnering with someone else? So it's really that idea of stepping outside of your own organization and bringing together the right people to support entrepreneurs. Because if there's one thing that I know about ecosystem building, it's that we need to put the needs of entrepreneurs front and center of our work. That makes us ecosystem builders. And with this, I am so excited to introduce you to our panel today. These panelists will introduce themselves and also share one sentence about what it is that they're doing to support their ecosystem. We're going to start with our wonderful co-host, Michelle, and I'm going to stop sharing and really put the panelists front and center of this conversation.
Thank you, Anika. Hi everyone. So as Anika mentioned, we're very excited to be presenting this panel that we've been cooking up for about a week and a half now. And from my side, I am based in Quito, Ecuador. I am the co-founder and CEO of IMPAQTO. We're an ecosystem building B Corp. We are financially sustainable, or we were up until COVID, financially sustainable through the running of 5 co-working spaces and an impact business accelerator. We are now focused on community and not leaving social entrepreneurs to fend for themselves. Yeah, and I'll tell you a little bit more about that. I am also going to be presenting some data from other ecosystem builders that are colleagues of ours from across Latin America as well. So I am wearing a little bit of the two hats. So it's the regional, but also the very personal ecosystem builder perspective.
Thank you, Michelle. Leon, how about you introduce yourself next?
Hey everyone, I'm Leon from Berlin in Germany. Here I am founder and managing director of Impact Hub Berlin. You might know Impact Hub. It's a global network of founding innovation spaces for social entrepreneurs. So basically what we try to do is shaping a future that works for all by supporting people and companies to create innovative solutions that tackle problems for people and the planet. And how do we do that? We provide at 100 places around the world co-working spaces where we bring together communities from the most various backgrounds, so entrepreneurs, consultants, people from larger corporates, foundations, and the public sector to work together to use entrepreneurship and innovation to solve and tackle these issues. And we don't only, as Michelle said, to become sustainable, our business model, we don't only run the co-working spaces, but we also provide consultancies. So we design and execute incubators, accelerators, but also innovation programs for larger corporates that are all geared towards creating innovations in the sustainability space. What do we do to support the community currently? I think we really try to listen to what they need, and even in being stuck at home, kind of give them support, peer-to-peer support, talk to each other. And then on a different note, we launched 2 weeks ago a huge online hackathon to create solutions, and I'm happy to talk a little bit more about that later. Thanks.
Wonderful. Thank you, Leon. Danielle, how about we hand it over to you?
Hi, good evening, everyone. I'm Danielle Anderson. I'm based in Nairobi, Kenya. I run 2 businesses here. The first is called Step and Stone, which is a coaching and strategy consultancy for early and growth stage entrepreneurs. And the second I've co-founded is called the AfriLove Connection Club, which is a membership network for female founders here in Kenya. So this network provides professional and personal support to the women at the helm of SMEs. We provide business training, roundtable discussions, and strategic advisory to those businesses. My role within the ecosystem is to build networks to provide practical business support and also to assist others in the ecosystem in program design and execution.
Terrific. Danielle, thank you so much. And last but not least, Rick Turoczy.
Thank you, Anika. Hi, I'm Rick Turoczy. I'm from Portland, Oregon, which is a small metropolitan area on the west coast of the United States. So it's still early morning for me. My day job is running an early stage startup accelerator called Pi. We've been around for about 10 years, and as such have been kind of the hub for both the startup activity as well as mentoring activity in our community. So given where Portland and Oregon are in the flow of COVID-19, we've just, we're only a week into the shelter in place kind of stuff. So a lot of our stuff is just purely reactive right now, trying to figure out what the community needs, how we can be helpful, and how we transition rapidly into this kind of new virtual environment for us.
Thank you, Rick. And I would actually like to stay with you right now, because my first question to the whole panel is, how are entrepreneurs in your community dealing with the situation? What are you seeing? And I know, Rick, that you went through an amazing amount of trouble in no time to survey your entrepreneurs and just find out what's happening, where can we help? Can you talk us through that process a little bit, and also what outcomes you've seen as a response to that?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for asking. We're very much a done beats perfect kind of organization. And so we try and jump to action whenever we can to make sure that people have the details and information that they need. So when stores started shutting and retail locations were having problems, consumer products companies, basically any type of small business in our community was starting to have problems, we immediately went out, created a rough survey. Over the course of 72 hours, got about 900 responses to that survey about how people were being impacted. I think the most staggering number for me was just those 900 respondents were projecting a weekly loss of $5 million in revenue. So across that group, $5 million every week not coming in. And when you extrapolate that to all small businesses in Oregon or all small businesses across the world, I think that number becomes completely staggering in proportion. And so based on that, we've been looking for ways to how do you stop this loss of revenue or capital? And one of the immediate ways was a bunch of folks started gathering details about places to buy gift cards directly from businesses, get capital in their hands. Even if it was kicking the can down the road a little bit, it was at least getting some revenue in there. And then we saw that kind of percolate nationwide in the US, people doing that work. And then also organizations like Stripe or PayPal that may support these organizations on the back end, helping them stand up virtual gift card systems so that people could generate revenue even when people can show up in person. So that's been one of the most immediate impacts we've seen in our community that seems to be helping.
Great. Rick, really, I know that you've been so dedicated to Portland, Oregon, and there's been so much great energy happening between Zebras Unite comes from there and Headed Start. There's a lot of B Corp. You have an incredible density of B Corps. I would love to hear from Leon how your engagement with Us versus Virus Hackathon played out on a national level. I know that that was a super rapid response. If I recall correctly, you guys put this on within 5 days with no funding, and it just went through the roof. Can you talk us through the process behind that and what you found?
Yeah, sure, happy to. So about 2 weeks ago, on a Sunday, me and a couple of other people who also run, like-minded organizations were on Twitter, kind of seeing the Estonian startup ecosystem, who was actually kind of the fastest and super quickly. They basically put up a hackathon in 4 hours. It was super impressive. We were all kind of watching and seeing about 1,000 people hacking away, and Sunday was kind of the final presentation. We were super impressed to see that in such a short amount of time, they had, gathered 1,000 people and just had, hit out, I don't know, something like, I can't really remember, to be honest, like 100, almost 100 solutions. And obviously they were all prototypes. I mean, most people are aware of a hackathon. So it's just, hacking away, like solving a problem for 48 hours with tech, non-tech, across the board people. And then you just have like a super rough prototype in the end. So we were super impressed and, started Twittering. I started asking other impact hubs. We got together. And then in no time, we basically had a little group or consortium of 6-7 organizations who were like, let's just do that. If they do it in 4 hours, we'll be able to do it in 5 days. Come on, next weekend. And luckily enough, one of the organizations was directly funded by our chancellery, which is kind of like the White House in the US. And they were like, you know what? I'm just going to tell my people there, and I'm just going to tell them about it. And we quickly wrote up two pages, and she basically pitched it Monday morning, and they were like, yeah, sure, why not? and I mean, for us, that response originally was like, what? I mean, like in any other country, bureaucracy is terror. And that was just basically like, yeah, let's try it. They're going to say no anyway, kind of thing. And they didn't. They said yes. And from that moment on, everything happened really quickly. I think we started thinking about a process. At that point in time, I still remember we were thinking that if we cross 1,000 people taking part, that's going to be awesome. By Wednesday, suddenly the government basically publicly called it the government's hackathon, which entirely changed the game. I think we had one huge difference. We were collecting challenges before we were starting to get people into making solutions, which is different to a normal hackathon. And after only 24 hours, we had 2,000 challenges only. Like, not even speaking of participants. And then by Friday, the organization team was like 100 people, and we had 43,000 participants signed up, 3,000 mentors signed up, 1,000 companies signed up to provide for free stuff. I'm forgetting stuff. Like it was just, we were just rolled over. And it was really like, I mean, I don't know, it was 20-hour days for 100 people team, like all across the board. It was crazy. But the great thing is there was 1,500 solutions created in those 48 hours with no funding, and just by 5, 6, 7 ecosystem organizations getting together, using their networks and just putting it down. And people were so like thankful to be able to tackle kind of the COVID crisis constructively with their skill set of being a coder, being a business developer, being a designer, just being an engaged citizen and like giving input. And I think that really like triggered this huge response of people who were at home. You know, you can't go outside. Many people can't really work on their normal job because it doesn't really, you know, you don't have too much to do. So why not, you know, why not take part? And I mean, we still have a Slack channel with 30,000 people on it who all want to create more solutions every day. They're like, how can we do more? Like, where do we get money for this? So we're just now really busy creating a follow-up program. We actually, at exactly when we're stop talking, I'm going to jump to the next call where we're publicly announcing the winners and the follow-on program that we're currently fundraising for. And it's insane. Just because the momentum is so big, we're now fundraising 4 million euros to put into the hands of all those projects to get it done. And people are like, you know, usually as an ecosystem builder, I'm talking about like 40,000 euros. And people are like, yeah, let's look at that really, really closely. And now we're going into fundraising. Like, yeah, and the total amount is 4 million and no one is winking an eye. So people are just really, really, really eager to find ways to get to those, to innovators, to get to people who can think of new solutions outside the box, because the current responses are not working. So I think that's really something that was really amazing for us. We never saw it coming, and it totally rolled over us. And now we all feel kind of the pressure also of really, really making it work and really helping those people putting those solutions into action, because there's a lot of cool stuff in it.
Leon, thank you so much. If you ever want to know how to break YouTube Europe and break Slack and make it all come crashing down, that's definitely one approach that works. Having heard about your national approach, I'm really curious to hear from you, Michelle, what you guys have learned in your surveys and what the situation is in the region that you're currently active in. Can you share a little bit more about that with us?
Absolutely. I mean, we've been on lockdown for about 2 weeks, and immediately 1 hour after the government measures were announced, we very quickly went into, like we were saying earlier, putting the oxygen mask on first and spending 2 days really recalibrating what we do within our team and really understanding what is needed. We launched one quick survey nationally that was then replicated by our friends Kunan in Peru. And then we joined forces with a region-wide Sistema survey. So overall, between all 3 surveys, we have over 3,000 respondents over the last week and a half. And up until last Friday, we had respondents from 19 countries gave us some really interesting information. So bear with me. So for example, one thing that we learned is that by last Friday, 22% of survey participants had already stopped operations. So they had already shut down. And when asked to estimate how much longer would they be able to survive should the situation continues, in particular, should the loss of revenue continue, 76% they said that within 2 months they would already be done. Like they can't really survive past 2 months. So we're looking at a very very serious economic reality. At the same time, we felt like we needed to dig deeper, so we started having one-on-one calls with a number of alumni from our accelerator, and we learned a couple of things. One is that as much as cash could help everyone right now, there's also the more intangible, soft emotional support to really navigate through this. We, of course, immediately started talking to the most innovative of our alumni and asking them, hey, how can we activate ourselves to help others? and they weren't quite yet there yet. You know, when you are in this shock and your livelihood and the livelihood of all the farmers that you work with or all the doctors that you work with is in the line, it's really hard. It's almost like everyone goes back to their reptilian brain and it's fight or flight, and you can't really be creative. So we've been really focused on creating programming for them that helps them really get into the other side of that shock. We've also found one more thing is that that even though the top concern is loss of revenue, the second concern all the way down, maybe only 5% of the startups, we're concerned about not being able to make payments to debtors. So there's two theories about that. Either Latin American startups are really good at paying their debts, or, which was what is most likely, very few have access to credit. So having very little access to credit, they have no debt to rely on, and yeah, I mean, many of them face other very real options, like, you know, some of them have to mortgage their own house, their grandmother's house, and now they're having to deal with much more personal decisions related to their own finances as well. So yeah, it's a little bit different over here.
A dire situation. Thank you for sharing. I'm so impressed at how you guys were able to jump in and get some data that really allows you to make, you know, a more metric-driven decision making. I'm very curious to hear, and Leon, you've already touched on this. What has been your biggest win so far as an ecosystem builder? What is something that happened that gives you hope? Something that shows how we as ecosystem builders are able to help on a systemic level to drive this forward. Leon, maybe we kick off with you and then we'll hand it over to Rick.
Yeah, maybe, I mean, obviously the biggest win is the hackathon, but I maybe want to piggyback on something that Michelle just said. I think, I mean, cash obviously is king for everyone. It's really hard right now. And we have a lot of businesses that face the same challenges, but we also see something that's, how do I deal with a crisis like that? Because we've all not done it before. So the kind of peer-to-peer approach of people supporting each other to make these really, really tough decisions is I think really key. You know, it's really great to dump yourself into, you know, a new innovation and a hackathon, do something new. That's great. But at the same time, everyone had, like, people have businesses that they need to make really tough decisions in. Same for me. Like, you know, we shut down our co-working space. All of my people are on kind of part-time. It's really complicated, and people have to make these decisions. And I think talking with others who are on the same moment and have the same challenges and learning together really, really helps. And we see that in the IMPAQTO local and global community, that people, like members, helping each other to make these decisions is really, really valuable. And as an ecosystem builder, oftentimes you have really good connections to people who can give very valuable advice. So if you have the phone number of that super great business consultant who's usually consulting the big corporates in your country, ask them to do a webinar that kind of, you know, puts down the most important info on how to do that and how to, like, calculate scenarios for your business. So that's one thing that I want to build on, because I think it's super important. And then to the more fun stuff, yes, I mean, the biggest win obviously was the hackathon. I mean, it totally blew us away. And we were really, really hoping to use that, that huge momentum to, really funnel money and resources to innovators to build viable solutions. So that's something that we're really working hard on now. And the second thing, obviously, is that the second biggest win is that now you're seeing hackathons happening everywhere. I mean, I'm basically getting an email a day. Michelle will know there's a hackathon happening in LATAM, and there's a hackathon happening in India. There's a Pan-African hackathon happening. There's a hackathon now everywhere, which is amazing because we'll have a lot of great ideas. But always mind you, great ideas are awesome, but they also need to be executed, and that again needs resources and money. So that will be then the second step. But being aware and seeing that so many people are starting this now and they're starting to kind of learn from this and also doing it, I think this is a great way of kind of two-way step for especially ecosystem builders of going, like, tackling problems and coming up with something that really plays to your strengths. I think that was really great to see. Yeah.
Great, wonderful. Rick, what have been some of the success stories that you've seen in Portland?
Well, I think personally, the greatest success we had from a PI perspective was PI being an early stage startup accelerator. We hold an annual demo day, and our demo days are less about investors and that kind of thing and more about bringing the community together to celebrate the businesses that are being built in Portland. And that's always a hub of activity for the community. It's a really happy celebratory time. And we saw, we'd been practicing for weeks and weeks and weeks for an onstage theater presentation. And when we saw what was happening with the COVID-19 situation, we had to, we asked the startups if they would be comfortable pivoting to more of a, slide-driven voiceover presentation. So basically exactly the opposite of what they'd been practicing for. And all of the startups stepped up and made things happen. And we were able to do a kind of virtual MC on Twitter and share YouTube videos from folks. And now I think the greatest win there is we now have a playbook that we can share with everyone else about if you're forced into going online for a demo day, here are ways we've seen it done. Pi's always saying, don't do it the way we did it, just learn from the way we did it and try and do something new. And so that was a big win for us. I think for some of our companies, it's been really interesting. I'll name two in particular. One is WorkFrom, which prior to this whole situation happening was the largest database of alternative workspaces in the world. So if you're visiting Berlin and want to know what coffee shop you should work out of, or if you're in Nairobi and want to know what's got the best Wi-Fi connection so you can get some work done, that was a database of that. So they had a lot of kind of remote workers as part of their community anyway. Once this started to happen, once everybody was being forced to work from home, they started helping everybody understand how to work effectively remotely. And just kind of change their whole focus, but in a really meaningful way because they'd already amassed that community that could be helpful for folks. And then another one that I think is super interesting, it's a company here locally called Milk Run, and Milk Run came through PI. They're currently in a TechStars program, but they are very much a what you would think of like an Instacart or other food delivery service, but specifically focused on small local farmers. So they connect the dots between local farms and consumers. And, we loved the business idea, but they were constantly having to educate others outside of Portland as to why this was important. And I think the situation we're all in now, it's become completely obvious why a system like this is important and not just relying on large corporate interests to do that work, but how do you do it from a grassroots perspective? So I've been really happy for those two companies in particular.
Wonderful. Thank you for sharing, Rick. Michelle, I know that with IMPAQTO, you guys had to pivot really quickly as well. I think everybody here who's space-based, that's just a huge shift in your business model. Are there any success stories or wins for you as IMPAQTO, for you as the co-founder, that you've experienced as an ecosystem builder so far?
Yes. So yeah, I guess my story is probably the same as many of all of you out there that rely heavily on revenue coming from real estate. We had to shut down our 5 co-working spaces, one that we had just opened one month ago. Of course, we have quite the amounts that we are owing come end of the month in a couple of days. We cut salaries. We had to cease some contracts for our staff. And we have prioritized payment to all small, medium-sized businesses that are suppliers. But even then, we needed to figure out a way to keep going. And in that sense, 2 things that have worked out really well for us. One is, I have to say, the trust of our partners. So for our accelerator and ecosystem building activities, we do have a grant from IADB Lab, the Inter-American Development Bank's lab. And the fact that they were able to trust us when we said, hey, you know, we need a lifeline here. We have these 3 projects that we can jump on right away. And the fact that they said, yes, let's change, you know, that is allowed. We can change now the project purpose and budgets to be able to make it. That really helped, and probably mirrors Leon's mention of, you know, getting government funding is, you know, bureaucracy hell. But I really appreciate like the fact that, you know, that there has been some sort of flexibility in terms of understanding where we can move the funding to very quickly to avoid any more damage to the ecosystem. The other thing that has really helped for us was the trust from our corporate partners. The second, a lot of them, maybe they're like over 50, you know, with an overall average of over 50 in their big corporate offices. They immediately asked us and said, hey, you know, can we give you a contract to teach us how to work remotely, for example, and we're working that out. Other big NGO partners that are worried about domestic violence and violence against women within, like in the lockdown, have asked us, hey, you know, why don't you come up with some innovative solution, bring in some of the change agents that you have in your network and to work towards that. So that has worked out really well. But I guess at our core strategy right now is kind of like dividing everything into kind of like a little pyramid, and we're assuming that that there will be a lot of entrepreneurs that in these weeks are going to be struggling, not just personally and emotionally, but also technically. They just don't have the tools. So we've created this personalized matching mentorship program that we're going to be launching tomorrow or the day after. Then we also have the learn and adapt strategy. It's so important to understand. I mean, I really took for granted the idea of working remotely. I do it, I turn on, but so many of these tools to pivot towards digital work or to pivot towards delivering your goods instead of opening a shop just have not made it to a lot of Latin America. So we've created a webinar series that really adapts some of the best content out there to Spanish. As simple as that. Like the internet is in English, folks. So we like, and no, at no other time have we realized like how important it is to really translate so many of these amazing resources to our language. And of course, finally, supporting the growth of those that are doing really well. We've identified already, you know, about a dozen startups that within this context have the potential of both growing as the business, but also growing their impact exponentially. So we've launched this small grants pilot program to give grants to these startups. So anywhere from telemedicine to really delivery of groceries to like, I guess like an analog delivery of groceries to senior citizens, or even things as simple as digitizing your invoicing system. Like in Ecuador, for example, you cannot get paid if you don't have this government issued electronic signature, which is quite the process to get. And we have a startup that has really quickly pivoted towards helping people invoice at the end of the month. And something as simple as that could make all the difference in terms of whether an entrepreneur gets to feed their family or not that month. So, so yeah, those are the things that we've been finding have been very helpful.
Fantastic. I love how quickly you were able to jump in and provide services and programming that is really tailored to the needs of the entrepreneurs you're working with. And secondly, I think it illustrates really beautifully how well-connected ecosystem builders are to be able to connect this social entrepreneur with this corporate and really trying to sort of recast the die to figure out what is fitting together, who needs what, who do we need to connect to help our entire community move forward. So Rick, the same to your example, I think was just perfect of illustrating how innovators have the right mindset, and we are well positioned as ecosystem builders to figure out exactly who has what, who needs what, and how do we get this resource or this person to this startup and sort of make those connections. So wonderful.
And if I may add something to that, because what you're saying is really important. It's one of our roles, but it's really important as ecosystem builders to not be the centralizers or the gatekeepers of these connections. So we've been very careful to have the entire team go and bring all the community building work into the virtual world. So we've used a platform, and I'm sure many of you have turned your physical co-working memberships into virtual co-working memberships, and it's important to not be the centralizer, to just let serendipity and community and connections happen. This will take some time, but it's it's a really true test of whether we've been doing the right work as ecosystem builders up until now. I don't know if any of you guys feel the same. I see some nodding there.
Yeah, I'm so glad you said that. That's such a fantastic point to always keep in mind, that we need to bring everybody on board. And if we can facilitate, and if we can bring on the right people who can help us do this work and really focus on the community. Thank you so much, Michelle. What a great point. Based on where we are now and being fully aware that different countries are at different points on that curve, I would love to talk a little bit more about what do you see coming? What is on the horizon? Knowing fully well that this is an incredibly uncertain time, and we have no way of foreseeing what the future holds. But Danielle, can you share a little bit more about the situation you find yourself in with Arevalo Connection Hub, but also with the services you provide for Step and Stone? And if you had to make a guess, what are some of the challenges that you think are ahead of you?
For both of those businesses? Yeah, so the Arevalo Connection Club to date has relied very heavily on face-to-face meetings where we bring the women in our network together. And historically, these are the events that they have loved the most, more than just our virtual facilitation of conversations and WhatsApp group and resources that we provide. So our business model now is kind of, it's still going, but we've had to move everything to a virtual space, and hopefully that will, well, we don't know how long it will last, but we're preparing ourselves for the worst that it may have to be for months ahead. We're looking into our business model to understand what changes might we need to make to membership fees, what other resources can we provide, how else can we add value to make up for the fact that this face-to-face element is missing. However, Kenya is such a face-to-face country. People here really thrive on personal relationships, meeting each other in person, and that's one of the things that I love about this, being here. But I do feel that this is an opportunity for people to become more comfortable with operating online, to be more comfortable with virtual meetings. E-commerce is definitely starting to pick up here, whereas previously it was very much a challenge for entrepreneurs to do any sort of e-commerce. So I think that there are opportunities, but we're kind of preparing for the worst in that we may not get renewals of our existing members. We may not get new members that come on board. On the coaching and consultancy side, I see lots of opportunities. I mean, the way that we're reacting now is to look at what entrepreneurs most need in this moment. So things like financial management, finally coming to grips with what your numbers look like. And although we can talk about this over and over and over again, when times are good, people don't pay attention to it. So now people really need to pay attention. So responding in ways like, how can we deliver training in that space? But also looking at expertise that we have in other areas, like how can you better work from home and delivering content like that. So I think all of us in the ecosystem have an opportunity to really now look at the audience that we're providing services to, adapt our business models to maybe fit them better. And as Michelle said, maybe we haven't been doing a great job so far, and there are changes that we can make. And how do we more collectively come together to provide the support, both to the entrepreneurs and to those of us who are providing support to those entrepreneurs?
Great, thank you, Danielle. I'd like to open this up for the whole panel. Are there any challenges that you foresee? I mean, obviously for entrepreneurs that you support, but also for you as ecosystem builders and moving forward, knowing how uncertain that is. Leon, go ahead.
Just because I want to build on Danielle, I'm trying to make it short, but it's also a question from the Q&A basically. There's so much support kind of pouring in, kind of how-to guides, all these kinds of things. And the question was like, how to deal with all of this offering. And I think it's a very good question. And also how to deal with this huge move from, we also relied a lot on offline stuff. And I think something that's really hard to bring online. So two things. So first, off to online, I think really trying to find out hard how to bring warmth and serendipity into the online world is a huge challenge, but it's definitely a challenge that as ecosystem builders, now is the time to go at it. And I think we've I mean, I can say from my point of view, I mean, we've always wanted to do it, but we never quite put enough effort into it, maybe because we never really cracked it. So maybe now is the time to crack it. They don't have an answer. We haven't cracked it, but I think we're really, like, our community and hosting team is really working super hard to find out more about it. And I think we're learning a little bit each week. So I think this is going to be a super valuable thing to do if you want to keep your community together, because it's this kind of warmth that you also need to be resilient. That's one thing. And how to deal with this onslaught of stuff and what can you do as an ecosystem builder here? I think that's a really good question. I think what you really can do if you want to provide for your community is curate. Like, really ask your community, what is it they need? Don't decide for them. Ask them, what do they need? Like Rick did, like Michelle did. Really ask them, like, what is it that, like, that's really hitting your heart right now? And then take on the job of asking your network, what is the best resources out there, existing resources out there that you can make available that you don't have to create. And I think it's exactly what an ecosystem builder does. You ask people what they need, you use your network to provide the best existing solution. And only if there's really nothing out there, if there's really nothing anywhere, you start doing it yourself. And like Michelle said, like, there's so much great stuff, all they have to do is translate it into Spanish. It's like, perfect. You know, highest value for your work, Michelle. Perfect. Like, that's exactly what I mean. So curate, look out there and make it really oriented towards your ecosystem and what they need, I think will be things.
And if I may add something to that, Leon, as much as we are doing a lot of the asking, like, what do you need? There's also, I don't know if it's cultural or if it's a thing of startup founders, but we also have to kind of listen in between the lines very carefully, because a lot of people talk about revenue and fears and donors, but, like, what is behind that fear? It's really that fear of really failing. And this is the moment we've been all preparing for, right? We, as ecosystem builders, we have to create that community of trust so that people decide to kind of jump off the cliff with you and take that risk to follow that dream, that amazing idea that they had. And then all of a sudden that cliff just became bigger. What we've found, or what we're, to answer Anika's question, is what we're looking forward to, or maybe not looking forward to, is the fact that we'll have to move very quickly towards what we call palliative care, right? Where maybe in 2 or 3 weeks, a lot of startup founders will find themselves in a situation where they really have to shut down. And of course, there's a legal aspect to that. There's a financial aspect to that, but there's also that emotional aspect, that well-being aspect. These people that are going to be shutting down their companies in the next few weeks are really precious to our ecosystem, because they have been collecting all these lessons learned for so long. So we are, like, I've been looking around for palliative care for startups for a little while, but yeah, there's this sense that we will have to create something a little bit more tailor-made, or maybe pick up from different areas such as public health, or learn from coaches, or learn from, I don't know, the Institute of Failure. Like, I don't know if our friend Betty Gasca is out there from Fuck Up Nights. They know a lot about really bringing people back from the dead. And that will be key to rebuilding our ecosystem in a few weeks.
Rick, is there anything you would like to add?
I would just like to emphasize the point that a number of the panelists have made, and I think it's that those of us who have run these shared workspace kind of environments, at least me personally, I find myself most struggling with, how does trust translate to this new environment? How do you develop that trust? How do you build that serendipity into, like, the work that you do, when so much of that was us just bringing the right people together and having them in the space? It wasn't even any more work than that. They would figure out their connections or figure out ways that they could be helpful with one another. And I have no concerns about bringing our programming online or scaling our programming if we need to do that. My concern is really, I'm not confident that I know how to build trust in this type of environment, and I need to figure that out for the community.
Excellent point. Thank you. And this helps us transition towards my last question is, what does support look like for you guys now? If we think about putting the oxygen mask on you as ecosystem builders, your organizations, your teams, so that you continue to be able to support entrepreneurs really on a systemic level, to create programming, to create trust and spaces for them to come for help, for support, for connection. How can the community on this webinar, including our audience, help you in moving forward and really make sure that you continue to exist and you're able to do your work that then amplifies to hundreds and sometimes thousands of entrepreneurs that need to survive? Who wants to go first?
I can go. In our prep call, we were talking a little bit about this as well. You know, the fact that ecosystem builders that are working or have reacted really well to adapting to the new reality, have been able to do so in part, maybe leadership, maybe the team, but sometimes it's just having a good accountant or having like a good admin person that helps you navigate through the new bureaucracy that you have to deal with to change your budget. And these things are not sexy, but they're really important. The institutionality of your ecosystem building organization is what allows us to do all the work. And that is what support looks like. Long-term support means really investing on those dreaded admin costs, on the staff, on making sure that the founders, the leaders, are able to take vacation. You know, all these like little things that really add up in terms of the resilience of organizations. And this is the time to make sure that funders and investors really come to understand the importance of investing in structures and systems rather than just on like nice flashy like initiatives. That is what I would say. I mean, not just for myself, but I think for a lot of our Latin American colleagues that I was able to talk to when we were preparing for this call.
I know Leon, and I know Leon has something to say about this. I also know Leon has to jump off to continue his work with the hackathon team. So Leon, how can we support you in moving forward?
Yeah, I was just thinking about this. So I think maybe two things from my side. So I think on the one hand side, we've talked a lot about kind of moving offline to online hosting, bringing more serendipity, like how do you actually host an ecosystem online well? And there is a lot of stuff out there. I think there's a lot of resources that have been produced also quite recently. There's cool stuff out there, but there's still a long way to go. And I think there's one thing, as a global ecosystem of ecosystem builders, let's try learning together. And for those people out there who have the power to allocate resources to that, help people, run research, run learning, try out pilots around this, because this is going to be so important, and we have to try stuff out, and this is going to cost money. So we need people who are ready and able to do that, and we need people who are ready and able to support that for the online kind of hosting and ecosystem side of things. And then on the other hand, I think as ecosystem builders, we are in a unique situation to be able to connect the newly arising needs and challenges from the COVID pandemic that are continuously upcoming. So we're in a unique position to connect challenges with innovators who are able to actually respond innovatively to these challenges. And I think, again, it needs, on the one hand side, entrepreneurs, innovators, ecosystem builders to be ready to go into that. But on the other hand, it also needs very bold funders, administrators, and people in large corporates who are ready to provide resources, access, and support to make these kinds of things happen. And this might come in the, in the looks of the hackathon. This might come in the looks of a support program for great innovations. This might come in many looks, and the more the better, because there's never one answer to a challenge like this. There has to be 1,000 answers, and it needs so many people really trying to think about this hard to come up with all these answers, so that we can really make innovation and entrepreneurship what we, at least at this panel, I feel it is an answer to the huge challenges of our time. And I think now is the time to shine and we need everyone to work together with no ego, with no holding back, and really making it happen. And then I'll take one more second to everyone who's in this. I'm really sorry. This is really usually not my thing to do. In a couple of minutes, I'll have to like quietly jump off this call because at 7 CET, we're announcing the winners of the hackathon publicly in kind of on YouTube. So wish me luck. I wasn't really able to prepare, so I'll just be in there like, thanks again for the invitation, Anika. And if there's any questions, Anika is going to share my email address.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you, Leon. Really appreciate your input. Rick and Danielle, how can we support you guys? Totally different locations, different contexts. What do you need the most to make sure that you as ecosystem builders can survive and by virtue of that continue to support entrepreneurs? Danielle, why don't you go first?
Sorry, I was trying to unmute. I was giving the floor to Rick, but ladies first, it's fine. I think that there's two things that that could support me in this time. The first is just a bit of empathy. I feel like we have to remember that a lot of the people like myself who are providing support to entrepreneurs are also small businesses. We don't rely on government funding or grants or NGOs or international development projects. So even for us, we are also facing unpaid invoices, low pipeline, uncertainty, big decisions that we have to make. So rather than just reaching out to us and asking us for supporting their entrepreneurs, also try to look after us as entrepreneurs ourselves and you know, extend the same type of help that you're offering to others. I think that's the first, is empathy. The second, on the After Love Connection Club front, I mean, for even just $5,000 to $10,000, we could support 500 to 1,000 women who are female founders here. So the more business support that we're able to give to people in this particular period of time, hopefully more of them can outlive coronavirus and make it through the other end of this. And because we rely so heavily on a membership-based model, it's just people aren't going to be able to afford the support that they need right now. So if there's anyone out there that's listening and has 5,000 to 10,000 that they're willing to part with, please get in touch.
Wonderful. Thank you, Rick.
I would just say that this is to Leon's point, this is a learning opportunity for all of us. I think I've been most impressed with the speed at which capital has been made available by organizations, and have demonstrated that for whatever the bureaucratic way we used to go about allocating that capital was, people are putting money to work right now in grants and other opportunities. And I would like to see that continue, and like to see folks, see you later, Leon, would like to see folks continue to explore new models for allocating that capital in a meaningful way for folks. I think on the flip side of that, we also see a lot of this well-meaning activity that is either poorly directed or not enough to be helpful because there aren't the entrepreneurs in the conversation. It's an entity trying to figure out how to fund something, trying to get stuff going, but they're ignoring a very important voice, which are the entrepreneurs or ecosystem builders who can help guide that type of funding and help them understand the reality of what is needed and the reality of what's happening to people in our communities. And I think just pressing pause and having that conversation could ensure a much more substantial impact from the way these funds are being allocated. So that's what I would ask for.
Wonderful, Rick, thank you so much. I want to be very respectful of everybody's time. And so many people in our audience submitted some wonderful questions that I'm dying to hear your all's input in. So here's what I want to offer to everybody. I have a long running list of questions and ideas. So Michelle has already agreed to co-author a write-up of this conversation that we will make available both at IMPAQTO and Social Venturers. And I will take the liberty to pick some of those questions from the audience and pitch them out to our panelists, who will then pick the ones that they feel like they can add value to. And we will sort of have an FAQ attached to that blog post. So I want to respect your time, but I also want to respect everybody's curiosity. Thank you so much for those questions. Let me quickly pull up that one last slide so you guys know how to get in touch with us, which I think I speak for everybody. We really encourage you to do. Let me just put that on present. A good way is mostly via email, and for people who are in very high demand, such as Rick and Leon, I encourage you to reach out via Twitter and get in touch with those folks. Also, I will do my very best to incorporate a lot of the resources that were mentioned today in the write-up. So everything about the hackathon, there was a question about whether Michelle's data will be publicly available. So I will try my best to source everything and bring that together. And would just like to leave everybody with some food for thought, maybe as you move forward, that systemic challenges require systemic answers. And that doesn't necessarily mean that it needs to come from government, even though I think every actor in the ecosystem has a role to play. But I really encourage everybody to think bigger than your own organization, think bigger at who are the nodes in your ecosystem, who you can partner with, whatever that looks like, to reach as many entrepreneurs as possible. And as always, put the needs of the entrepreneurs front and center. I think that's the most important thing we can do right now. And for us as ecosystem builders, as a community, as you know, that's what I'm really passionate about. So over on Social Ventures, we'll be sharing parts of this conversation, and also invite you all, if you want to tell your story about ecosystem building and what you're seeing. All of our panelists have already been interviewed for Social Ventures, so I would be honored to be able to tell your story and invite you to join some of our pilot programs, which is conversations like this, which I call fireside chats, where we come together around very impact-specific topics and source some experts to share their experiences. And secondly, I'm currently piloting a mastermind for ecosystem builders for social change. So it's really an opportunity for us to come together for both personal and professional growth. So come on over there. The next newsletter comes out later this week. I would love for you to join us. And that's also going to be a great way, either through IMPAQTO or myself, and hopefully all of y'all's outlets, to see when our write-up comes out, so you can really dig deeper into some of the resources that were shared. And with that, I want to say thank you. You get a digital applause to our panelists. Thank you so much for joining us. Santosh, thank you for hosting us. I don't know if there are any parting words from the Skoll Foundation before we wrap up today.
Just three quick things. One is a huge thank you for giving us the privilege of having the opportunity to host us. Two, I should have said this in the beginning, the session is being recorded. I will work with IMPAQTO folks to get it on the Skoll website. So many of folks are asking about the notes, and yes, so for folks who are listening in, this is going to be an opportunity for you to share it around or go back and look at the conversation. And lastly, a plug for 11 a.m. Eastern on Thursday, 2nd of April. Come join our big plenary. It's going to be an important moment, but also we would love for you all to be there virtually to be a part of our community. So thank you. Those are the three things.
Wonderful. Thank you, everybody. Enjoy the rest of your week. Enjoy the Skoll World Forum, Collective Strength, and Skoll Goes Virtual. And I look forward to talking to many, many, many of you going forward. Thank you so much.